Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 13 of Down the Pub podcast, brought to you by Wolves of Westminster, the podcast where we end up talking about all the political stuff you'd expect to talk about at the pub when every other interesting topic has been done to death. I once again am your host, Peter Simpson, runner of the Haryan Gláeddyv channel and contributor to Wolves of Westminster. I am joined once again by the editor of Wolves of Westminster, Patrick Timms. Hello, Patrick.
Good day, sir.
We are also joined by contributor to Wolves of Westminster, Simon. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Peter.
And we've also brought along a third guest, Peter Barnes, the presenter over on Talk TV and, of course, contributor to Wolves of Westminster. Hello, Peter Barnes.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun, I think.
Oh, yes, I hope so too. I mean, I'm sure as we go through, people will get the idea that I'm Peter Simpson or Peter S. You're Peter Barnes, Barnesy, Peter B, whatever.
Yeah.
It will be
the
obvious
northern
one. Well, we're both. Well, I'm northern as well.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
we're
of
all
course.
northern.
Yeah, it's true, actually. Yeah.
We are all northern. That's the problem.
Oh my God.
We sound
If
the
this was
same.
the BBC, we'd get a grant.
Oh, true. Oh, we should apply. But there's a lot. There is a lot to talk about this week. It has to be said, and I think the topic we all want to talk about is reform. Have come out with policy. I think a lot of people are actually somewhat happy with. I'm not seeing an awful lot of complaint for it, and that's obviously Danny Kruger coming out with the plan to trim down the civil service. He did a good old speech on it on Monday, I believe, came out with a blog as well. Effectively, everyone kind of has the same idea. The civil service is bloated. There's a lot of wasted potential space. On top of that, people are under managers that are quite useless and they feel like they don't deliver anything. And so the whole idea of that is we'll look into each department. A lot of them will have to be cut down. Some even have to be expanded, say border force, because Reform wants to deport people. It looks like they're properly looking into it, and not only that, asking people as well. The Times described it as snitching on their colleagues, but really was saying anonymously tell us, please, what you think can improve, what you think's done well, because they want to do it properly. And once again, this is showing that Danny Kruger has been an absolute, almost essential defection for reform. So from what I could tell, I'm quite happy with it. I'm sure the panel's largely in agreement.
Well, it certainly it wasn't something that most people saw coming. Funnily enough, I don't think. Although it's one of the you ex post facto, you sort of think, well, actually, maybe certain people were well aware before the fact. But at the end of the day, it seems as though he's probably been planning this for some time, which is usually the way that defections work. This was another case of a theatrical case of crossing the floor of the House during the middle of someone else's speech, and I think people know what I'm referring to during the Brexit times where that sort of thing. Okay, so, but I don't think that's what it is. But it is interesting that Reform is continuing to expand their policy platform, and we are going to see what else comes from that. There's also been, because I'm on the LGA mailing list, local government association, and they have been very frenetic over the past week and a half, putting out responses from local councils to government proposals, which rather gives the impression that nobody quite knows what's going on, or that they certainly feel there's something to respond to. It does look as though that there appears to be chaos at the heart of government at the moment. Now, Peter B, you probably spend more time in Westminster circles, or at least in the socialite end of things, that you know what I mean by that, than most of the rest of us. So I wonder what you could tell us about that.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I think there's been no backlash to it because nobody cares. In the general public, that is. I think everybody knows the civil service is bloated and we hear all the excuses of the blob and all this kind of stuff. But we've just had a devastating budget, and Nigel Farage got himself into a spat with the BBC. So as a dead cat, or as I call it, a dead zoo at this point to throw onto the table, they've come out with this, please pay attention to something else. Nigel Farage is not a racist. That's what this announcement is. That's why nobody saw it coming, because it wasn't supposed to be announced yet. That's the rumor that's flying around SW1, is that realistically, they've had to announce something to change the conversation, because Nigel got himself in a schoolyard mudslinging contest with the BBC, and most voters I don't think see Nigel as moving on, from his UKIP years and from the culture wars and all this kind of stuff. They just see him as the same kind of guy picking fights or, being led into them, which I think he was with this one. But again, I don't disagree with what Danny Kruger's announced. I think it's pretty sensible. It's going to be difficult to sell 60,000 job losses, though, which is what was the headline figure I read. But yeah, I think it's going to be it's going to be welcomed pretty much by all the right people, and all the wrong people are going to be annoyed by it, which therefore makes it the right thing to do. But yeah, it's interesting you say about the LGA, because my thing is it'll be councils that are get hit the hardest here, because they'll have staff stripped and budgets stay where they are or go down, and then they're going to be really stuck because we haven't reformed what councils are supposed to do. So there's a lot still up in the air. There's not a lot of policy actual detail, which is peak reform, but there we go. But yeah, I have to admit, it was very welcome. You are perfectly correct that if without Danny Kruger, there'd be even more trouble amongst reformers and their kind of lack of policy base. But yeah, that seems to be my take on it. But I'm somewhat known as the reform basher, so I might be a little bit biased.
Well, I mean, I'm a bit of a reform sycophant almost. I think my channel's known a bit of it as kind of the reform cope channel, which is fine, which I'm fine to be known as. Because I mean, I agree anyway with pretty much what Peter B says there. Reform nothing on the ground with policy. You'd kind of expect that. They've only been a serious party for about 9 to 12 months, something like that. So I'm not too bothered about that. But the direction they're going is good, and they're serious about bringing in expertise from the outside, even from within the civil service. Which, you listen, I mean, Dominic Cummings is the most vindicated man in Britain at the moment, which I knew years ago anyway. On top of that, they're doing pretty much what he suggested, which is there's good people in the civil service, get them on board. But I don't know if you've got a take on this, Simon.
And I think I was initially, and I will be very honest with you, as you know, I sit quite comfortably on the fence in between both Peters here, insofar as I'm quite the reform neutral. I am a sort of sensible centrist on this, if you will. I was a bit sceptical of Kruger mainly because of all the Christian evangelicalism. However, he has proven incredibly useful and I think incredibly competent at doing exactly what they need him to do, which is to go and sit kind of in the back of the office and trawl through lots and loads of very boring things to the rest of them, and come out with some policies that maybe aren't going to make a huge splash, but they're going to make the right impact on the right people. And above everything else, I think this particular announcement, I think it was actually quite conservative. I think it was actually quite moderate, because he said, the takeaway from this was 68,000 jobs are going to be cut. We're going to take this back to pre-pandemic levels, and we're going to create a big pot for bonuses by making cuts to pensions and whatnot. Yeah. I think it's something that's quite sensible.
The other level of this as well is effectively centralising Whitehall again. So they've got office buildings around other areas of London. I don't know London well enough to say exactly where, but he wants to bring them all back to Whitehall, the actual street as well. Obviously, no working from home as well, which given I work from home, that's kind of the only bit I'm like, you're a bit too heavy on that, but whatever. I understand though, especially given all the horror stories you hear of people in the civil service doing nothing, and anecdotes I have of people over COVID buying PS5s and completing The Last of Us about 5 times. Yeah, I can understand why they're sceptical of that, but
on the Zoom call,
just nipping on that one. It's one of those where, I mean, as you know, Peter S. People in our industry have been saying for some time, we can actually do most of our jobs from home.
Yeah.
But of course, we have had all of this business, and then you remember from Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg MP, no longer MP. There was, that was that note that he left on people's desks.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to seing you again soon.
Yeah, my brother's friend got one of them. Yeah, Pete. I think he moved apartment.
Well, that's what you do. You don't leave the civil service. You just you migrate. But in fairness, so a question I did not get to ask at yesterday's press conference was, because I've read the paper, the policy paper.
For context, this was a different press conference. This was SEM.
It was a different press conference, yes, which I didn't know about. But there we are. So 68,500, I believe, job redundancies they wish to make.
Mhm.
In the policy paper, there is a single reference to the word redundancy, or indeed the word redundant.
Mm.
That's it. But it doesn't say anything about it. So the question I was prepping to run, because I thought they were going to be talking about this, and in fact they weren't, but was, okay, this figure of 5.2 billion that you say is going to be saved by all of this, have you offset the sheer amount of redundancy packages against that figure? Is that included within that figure?
Mm. Or
is there something else to be done there? You see, now we don't know the answer to that question yet because it's not been asked. And I notice that by the mainstream media, it's also not been asked, whether that is the case. So it's actually, and I can say from an employer's point of view, well, former employer's point of view, it's not cheap making people redundant. You're looking at costs going forward. Okay, right, I'm not paying you 40 grand a year anymore, whatever it is. But it's not cheap to make someone redundant. So what I should like to know from Reform is, have you factored that in? You only mention it once, but you give no details. You mention the word redundancy once. Does that factor into the 5.2 billion savings, or does it not? And if it does, can that be demonstrated? You see, that's the kind of the level of policy detail that should have been in there. And as you know,
I was going to say, just to dive in there really quickly, it's a really good point, because one of the things where Reform have lacked real credibility is actually on the figures, on the numbers. They've always been a little loosey-goosey with them. And I do think that if it's not been factored in, that will damage the very fragile credibility that they have on this issue. Because if you notice, over the budget period, we didn't hear very much in terms of, well, what would Reform do? We didn't hear who's going to be the chancellor. They stayed very far away from the budget during the budget period, and I think it was noticeable. And I think, again, this, if you're right there, Patrick, and it's not been factored in, they're in for a bit of a beating in the press, because yet again, they're not looking like a serious party, despite being quite significantly ahead in the polling.
Well, quite right. And when we look at this as well, I mean, because I can imagine if they do get in, and if the same people get in, plus a whole load more people get in, it could well be Mr. Tice. I think if I were Mr. Farage, I would probably put him in as Chancellor. And when I said this, well, I didn't say it, but when I did hint it at him, though. You sort of think, okay, so this is where it could even be easy. What needs to happen is they need to have a serious internal discussion. You put out a policy paper. Now, what I will do, because there's a Wolves podcast, I know we've covered this before, but I will just very briefly go back over the story that we put out about the Britannia cards, where they managed to make NAFL reference to the self-employed in terms of this scheme. So I think it would be helpful for them. This is one of the things that Wolves do, is nip at the heels. Now, it doesn't mean we're opposed to them. It doesn't mean we're opposed to them.
No, I know. I just like nip at the heels of Wolves.
Yeah.
Well, I did use that expression consciously. Yes, the Wolves have teeth, and we know how to use them.
Yeah.
But we're not anti-reform.
No, we're not. We've got me on as host.
You got me for balance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm all up for balance, because as much as it's true, they've certainly tried to put more effort into the numbers with subsequent policies, such as I think the prisons one had quite a few numbers on, and most of them stood up to some scrutiny. But as you say, there's always more detail you can get into, and that you obviously will need. And the redundancy one, I think Danny, he might have been asked about it and made reference to it, but as you say, it didn't really go beyond "we're looking into it," which I think you'll go to hear a lot of over the next couple of years. And then maybe at the end, it's got to be a manifesto that hopefully will blow everyone away. But obviously, if they're not coming out with decent numbers now, they're still going to get bashed by Peter B, which is fair enough, do that.
No, so I just say on this one, I get accused of quite a lot of things. My thing is very much it's about elevating them, because they're going to have the biggest uphill battle when they get into power, or if they get into power, that any party will ever face. Because you're not going to have just the opposition against you; the entire establishment is going to try to prevent anything getting done, because it's Nigel Farage. They've got to be ready now. So if we're asking these questions and we're not exactly anti them, then what are the people who are anti them willing and capable of wandering down and actually causing real trouble? But they should be having these conversations now, so that when they get into power, it's plain sailing from day one. This is so important. The planning process for Nigel and Reform UK is key. And if they don't sort it, it's just a waste, and yet another wasted 5 years potentially.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right.
On these numbers, gentlemen, if I can just very quickly say something interesting. Danny Kruger's out here referencing Reddit and Substack. This man's in the weeds. This man has been properly where the serious sorts of, I say serious, the properly nerdy and probably quite superficial but necessary conversations are happening. So I think it's very interesting that we've got actually quite a lot of attention to detail coming out of them. I think they've only still got maybe one or two actual policy researchers, which probably ought to be improved, but it is a good start.
Yeah, I will say as well, when I was at Llandudno for the rally there, I did notice quite a few young men in suits who were definitely younger than me, in their early 20s. Jack Anderton as well. So I think this will also be what's bringing their attention to Reddit and Twitter. Max Tempers being the right-wing account on Twitter. Mine, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so which is a very good thing, because you would not. It's like Labour, Tories probably know now actually, but Labour don't even seem to know what's going on Twitter. To be fair, Motability got through, but that's thanks to obviously the Tories bringing that up first.
Tyson had a stall at their conference. Motability had a whole stall at their conference. They have certainly got through.
We mentioned that in a podcast you weren't on, but we reckon they were there to try and kind of improve their image to Labour, to keep Audis and all that there.
I think that was about as effective as a shove into the face.
Well, I know. Well, it's so difficult to. How can you justify Audis
taxpayer-funded landlords for people with ADHD is not a very good look.
Well, quite. To be fair though, before Peter B brought up the establishment attacking Farage, that's definitely been happening. It's all guns blazing almost this week. You've got.
Oh yes.
Obviously, you've had the whole school days thing, which people I know in real life, no one's even mentioned that. What they have mentioned though is the Russia thing with Nathan Gill, even though he was kicked out before Farage came back. I think he was only leader of Wales for about a month or something. He wasn't there that long, but it makes headlines, doesn't it? So, as a result of that, now Starmer's come out to say, "Oh, we'll investigate foreign donations in all forms of politics," and it's quite obvious that there's only going to be one type of investigation, or one country, looked at, which is obviously Russia, and that's obviously a result of this. They're not going to look into China with with Labour, Saudi Arabia throwing money about, Israel as well. I'm sure it's going to be, which to be fair, China and Russia are threats. I don't think you can quite say enemy states. So that at least makes sense, but to
be fair, in politics, if you haven't received any foreign donations yet, you've probably not got anywhere.
Well, that's also true. Well,
yeah.
I wonder how many Ben Habibs.
That's such a good point.
But where's the line for this foreign donation's okay, but that one isn't? Especially because the Labour government.
Yeah.
There's another one Max Tempers came out with. They sent activists over to America to support Kamala Harris. So were they not?
The difference with former corruption minister. So I was just saying, a former corruption minister that's just been indicted in Bangladesh. I think we've forgotten that lovely bit of foreign political interference. That the dictator of Bangladesh, her niece was the corruption minister, and is now a wanted woman in Bangladesh. I think that's just going to get married.
Yeah, true.
I was just going to say, there was a spate of ministers who took their brief a little too seriously. We had the homelessness minister trying to kick people out of her house. We had the corruption minister who got indicted for corruption, and the foreign secretary forgot that he wasn't supposed to promote foreign interests when he gave away the Chagas Islands. So there was a key moment there where I kind of think that they didn't really understand the jobs that they were offered, and when they're dealing with the consequences of it again. But it is a good point about Jalib Sadiq, though. That is interesting how that story has not made any impact whatsoever, despite the fact, one, it's hilarious, and two, it's very important.
Yeah, no, it's
Imagine if we had like some I don't know, reform MP like Mr. Alexander McCorrupt or whatever, and his uncle was a Russian oligarch. I think there'd actually be prescriptions. The party would get banned. But Jalib Sadiq happens, absolutely zero consequences. Not even going to be extradited.
Yeah, that's one that's not broken through either. But obviously, the Nathan Gill story has, which is understandable because it's reform. I will say you did also miss when we have a justice minister who's getting rid of jury trials.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh yeah, I'm not even starting on that.
But isn't it interesting, gentlemen, that in fact, you can judge. You can put on a scale of something when you put a 1 to 10 or whatever it is, that you can judge just how, I don't want to say corrupt exactly, but just the state of the place by what stories don't get cut through, precisely because anyone looks at it and goes, yeah, I mean, it's not like I didn't expect that. You see, that kind of thing. And so sometimes when we look at stories that should have got cut through, in fairness, and didn't, I was disappointed when our story about the British Polling Council didn't get more cut through, because really that is actually quite shocking that we have the body that represents 33 out of 34 polling organisations in this country, and they quite happily brand Reform UK as far right and compare them to the National Rally in France, which of course has far more of a history, shall we say, and yet really not very much came out of that, and it's what people want to pay attention to. Sadly, you are the slave of the media in terms of what they want to pay attention to. But you also are the slave of the people who, and as you, Peter B, and I know perfectly well in terms of where the politics actually happens in Westminster, and you and I both know exactly where that happens, or the several places that happens. You and I know perfectly well that people talk to other people, and maybe this will get promoted, or maybe this will get buried, or just ignored, and there we are. We both know how that works. It's one of those where you have a problem, I think, with what is deemed to be important being decided by some people and not other people, and the power in Westminster lies in whose opinion as to what is important, as to what is not, is deemed the more valid.
Agreed. Sadly, very much agree with that. And you wonder why we're in the state that we are in. That is why. Our politics is falling apart because it is not based on anything of principle or, truth. It is based on who is the most popular and who is often the loudest in the room. And it is exhausting to be around most of the time.
Well, I'm glad I look at it.
You know what? Speaking to some American, sorry. Speaking to American colleagues of mine, I have to say, it is very, very surprising how small and closed our political system is. It is genuinely decided by less than 150 people, I think. Whereas if you go to America, it's absolutely enormous. Here, no comparison to what's going on over there.
I mean, I was going to bring up the example of the Spectator came out with their Christmas edition, which I do have. But obviously, for some reason, the biggest story of that magazine was Bonnie Blue supports Nigel Farage. And I saw that report on Sky News, which, having actually read it, and I posted the excerpt on Twitter, there's 2 paragraphs where she basically says, I don't like inheritance tax, and there's too many immigrants, therefore I like Nigel Farage. And that made it to Sky News.
I think there's a little bit of a...
which my girlfriend was watching, and she put her head in her hands, and I just thought, well, that's the attack work then, hasn't it?
Yeah. What's interesting with that story in particular is the divide in the kind of Reform base over whether they should have kind of said, welcome to the team kind of thing,
Yeah.
or no, we don't want your endorsement. That's the interesting factor, because this is the thing with what cuts through and what doesn't. It's often the reaction of the politicians of the political parties that define whether something cuts through, because unfortunately I do think Reform have a tendency to overreact to things and get sucked in. I used the BBC racism thing as a prime example. Nigel should never have made that pop at the journalist, because that fed the narrative and therefore it became a much bigger story. If he'd have said, whatever, I didn't say this, whatever anybody thinks, whatever, it's years ago, and moved on, it would have been fine. The problem is he continued to have 3 different opinions. He went from I didn't say anything to I don't remember to if I did say anything, I didn't mean it. Well, that's 3 different positions on the same story. So therefore it is a story, and it's this message discipline that's going to be their downfall. But when it comes to certain people having too much power and that being too few, the difference between here and America is that the independent scene, when it comes to the media, is a lot more powerful and is actually independent. The problem of over here is a lot of independent places are all owned by the same people. They've just created another establishment.
Yes.
That's half the problem. But yeah, I'm sure that's another podcast.
Well, it's not us, though.
You've got the
Saying
same.
funded, I wish we were.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Wolves is independent media, so
Please donate.
we ask the questions that people don't ask. Like we asked about the British Polling Council thing. We asked about the Britannia cards thing. We asked about, as I say, there's about 68,500 people. How exactly are you going to pay for those redundancy packages? Now, these are the questions. I sit in press conferences with people from the BBC, ITV, Sky, GB News, Channel 4, The Telegraph, The Guardian, and they don't ask the kinds of questions that we ask, which is why it's important that we're here. And it's also important that we talk about these things, and it's important that the people who listen to us can hear these perspectives. What we're not doing is giving our own sort of outlandish opinions, if we have any, and I'm sure we've probably all got a few laid up in store. But that's why it's important that platforms like this do exist, so that questions like that can be asked. You see, so when I look at the coverage that we have at the moment, the trade union stuff that's going on,
Yes.
and we have Andrea Egan, if that's how it's pronounced. So she's now the new leader of Unison. I am ex-Unison, I should point out. Now, her election is seen as a bit of a blow to the Prime Minister, in that where she is alleged not to have been his preferred candidate. We've also seen the modern Labour Party moving away from the trade unions. So, well, certainly as they see it. And this is one of the biggest signs yet that appears to be the way the trade union movement is taking it. So then we have to look at, okay, this is, it's right before Christmas. Oh, hey, great. Good Christmas present for her. But at the same time, it was just under 60% of the vote, which is decisive enough. You see, but at the same time, she is saying during her campaign that she intended to hold Labour's feet to the fire. And this is just one of the things with the trade unions. It really doesn't matter who's in power, whether it's the Tories or Labour or as it may be Reform, or anyone else. It really doesn't matter. Some people's politics are founded upon rebellion, you see. And it really doesn't matter who it is. It's very easy when it's the Tories, because they're the evil ones, apparently. But it turns out that even when it's the party that you would be typically expected to support, actually, no. We're just going to oppose you for the sake of opposing you. So that's an interesting story from today.
Yeah,
Now
I
that you
think that's
say
such
that,
an important story.
I'll add it
Oh, I'm
there.
so sorry you interrupt this. I just think it's very interesting that now that they're on 17% of the polls, everybody seems to be landing Labour. I don't know what they stand for and who supports them anymore. If the unions are leaving and you've got people like Jamie Driscoll joining in with the Greens, I have no idea what these people are supposed to represent anymore. It's like it feels like we have a caretaker government.
Wow. He's been called a caretaker prime minister by the MPs as well.
Well, in fact, we're about to publish an article probably tomorrow now, the review of this final PMQs of the year, and the word caretaker, shall we say, is in the headline. You see, so we're looking at that because yes, indeed, a lot of people are saying things like that, and it does really appear to be a case of Buggins' turn now, doesn't it? It is sort of well, we basically just, what do we stand for? We'd like to be in charge for a bit, please.
Yeah, that's exactly what it has
Like
been since day
Belgium.
one. Yes, true. The only time that anybody's ever said that sentence. But the reality is, for me, is the reason this story is so important is it's about the money. It's about the money and the fact that the unions give the Labour Party its kind of moral kind of sheet to wear. Do you know, it's moral costume for Halloween, that kind of thing. Do you know, so we are the party of the working class because we've got the trade unions. If the trade union movement walks away, like you say, their identity is somewhat walks out the door with it. Because let's be honest, the Labour Party haven't really represented working class communities in a very long time. I mean, you always have to remember that Theresa May should have had the Boris majority, if not larger, at that general election. So it's always one of those things, like you say, it's always easy when the Tories are in because it's easy rhetoric. But I do think if you link up with the Uniting Unison are both going to most likely have these kind of disaffiliation votes. It doesn't really matter if they win or not. I think it's the fact that they've had the vote is the shot across the bow. And there'll be a lot of people in the Labour Party who run the Labour Party, not Keir Starmer, who will be starting asking, well, what do we do when the money walks out? Because that is going to be a big factor as to who wins the next general election. It's can you keep going and will you have enough?
Well, I mean, the Tories have had their own problems with money
No.
supply, as I understand it, shall we say.
Reform, though.
14 million quid on the new headquarters, I think. Well, the Tories say they have, well, we say that the Tories have problems with money. They have just shelled out £14 million for new headquarters, which they're now apparently own outright. So maybe they're trying to fix it. And they did, to be fair to them, outperform Reform, I think, almost in every single quarter apart from this most recent one in terms of donations.
Oh, I thought, yeah.
So,
yeah,
fairness to
say recently is the 9 million, isn't it? It's the second largest
that
donation
was
ever.
That was a bit fudged though, because he did that last minute, and then we're like, oh yeah, we have the biggest ever political donation. We beat everybody this quarter. It's like a guy gave you £9 million at like the last hour. I think you timed that.
It made the
Just so
headlines,
you
didn't
can
it?
It made the headlines. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, the game is the game, as I say. However, I think the Tories did out fundraise Reform quite a bit before then.
Yeah, they have raised consecutive quarters. The big problem Reform have is the fact that they were relying rather a lot on Richard Tyson, Ben Habib, and Rupert Lowe.
Yeah.
Well, two of them got kicked out the door, and again, the money walked out with it. And let's not forget that Tyson's money was a loan; it's not a donation, so he will want it back. And if he has a bit of a spat with Nigel and walks out, it wouldn't surprise me if he asks for his money back, considering Nigel took his political party.
Yeah, and if he doesn't get Chelsea, who knows? Maybe he'll end up saying, "I want all my money back," and there'll be some ridiculously long court case. I just think, yes, the Tories have out fundraised them, but then you can make the flip side argument: Reform have fewer expenses because there's far less Reform staff, there's far fewer people on the payroll, and they don't really need to have that much money spent on the HQ because they do a lot of their stuff online.
The problem is you need people on the ground for the general election.
No, you do.
You need coordinators, and they don't have them. That's the thing.
I think they do. They have regional
people in place
coordinators who are on about 50 grand.
Oh. Well,
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually.
Yeah,
It's worth referencing actually from
Peter S knows more about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a branch, and obviously do activism for them quite a bit. I mean, it's a branch in Wales. It's one of the biggest branches in the country because Wales is rural and it's massive, and you drive everywhere to get to houses. You know, they started off amateur as they would, but I know they've been given quite a lot of material on how to run campaigns, and the operation it's leaps and bounds from 6 months ago. It really is. So I mean, I went leafleting last week, and 20 people showed up, something like that, for quite, it's just it's just a little village with a rural area. It's split up as it should be. 200 houses each if you're per like team if you're doing the streets, and then a couple of people. Woman's on a motorbike just going around dropping off leaflets to the farmhouse and what have you. That's far better than it was a few months ago at a by-election where first time they turned, 4 people turned up, couldn't get all the leaflets out. It's definitely improved from what I've seen in my branch anyway. So, big applause to them, but I won't say which branch it is.
It's interesting you mention the numbers because it literally, yes, most of the time I've been canvassing, and I've been canvassing for both major parties in the past. You'd be lucky to get half a dozen.
Yeah,
people.
That's my experience of it.
Well, yeah, as a long-suffering sort of Tory activist, I will tell you, being under the age of 55, you are basically doing all the work because you're the only person of the group that doesn't have arthritis.
It's
So
I
I would love to trot off to the pub halfway through the session like some people do, but because my legs actually function, I've got to get 3/4 of the leaflets out.
It's the same in Reform. I'm basically known as the guy that can go up hills.
Well, do you know, I'm going to have a bit of a moan here. I once went out campaigning, like properly leafleting, in a reasonably unwinnable ward up against the Lib Dems, God help me, with basically a broken foot. And I managed to put myself in bed for the next week doing that. And the candidate still lost. And the only reason I did that was because the branch kept begging me because I was the only person that wasn't in an ability scooter. I was after that, but
Well, they ruined their one asset.
Well, see, we've talked about this before on this podcast, haven't we? We've talked about the certain other kinds of people that we've referred to before, who might well be very opinionated on the television, but you put them on the doorstep, well, they'd be useless. You're actually having conversations with people. I've had shoes thrown at me, thrown at me out of an upstairs bathroom window, which is a pretty good indication of it might be time to leave now. But
it's
not a voter.
No, I'd put it down as a maybe.
Yeah, well, exactly.
It's just the one shoe.
I've had doors slammed in my face, all that kind of thing. And you think it's all very well, and with no disrespect to Peter B, it's all very well to be behind a camera and a microphone when you're on the doorstep. And of course, you know about this as well, Peter. You know about this as well. So I'm not singling you out as such. I'm just saying, it's all very well when you're talking about politics in a studio. But then you go out on the doorstep, and in fact, the impression is quite different that you're left with.
Oh, I've done my time as a leaflet fodder. I tell you that. I always just take people who had the letterboxes on the ground, like on the law. Put them in the middle. It should be like a standard law that's where they go. And it's for politicos who have to literally, do the door raid and all the rest of it.
My favorite game in the world is how do these people receive post? When you go up to a house, it's clearly not been that's clearly been privately built, and you go, where in the goddamn hell is your letterbox? How do you receive mail? Where is this?
But you see, as a canvasser, Simon, this is basically the intelligence test. If you can find where you're supposed to leave it, then you get to deliver the leaflet. You have earned a chance to deliver that leaflet. If you can't find it, then you're not past the test.
I'll give you something even better. I invented what I call the Lib Dem driveway matrix, which is the bigger and longer the driveway, the more likely they are to vote Lib Dem.
That's an
So if I've got to spend longer than 10 seconds to get to your front door, I'm just going to turn around because I know you're going to live there.
I used to live in a very
Anywhere
urban
south
area.
of
Very true.
it's like more south of it's horrible.
In all fairness, in some sort of Labour Tory marginals, they would say the same thing about the Tory candidates, not candidates, Tory voters.
Yeah.
Oh, those were the days.
Well, do you remember
when we had voters?
He had six. He had six. Like, kid you not, he had 6 cars in the driveway, and I just looked at my organizer. Was like, "Do I need to bother?" No.
Well, it is. To be fair, it is a typical test, isn't it? You know, if I have to spend half an hour walking down your driveway, then you're probably voting Tory. I would guess that one. Although you never know, half of them might be voting Reform these days. You don't know.
Yeah.
So,
And yet, the weird ones have voted Labour out of guilt.
Well, as you say, Simon, though, as well, if you're in the southwest, they might well be voting Lib Dem. Yes.
Oh no, it was Cambridgeshire. I mean, the thing is, all the cars on the driveway were electric as well. So I was just like, I'm not going to bother. That's.
You do have to be a bit tactical at times, don't you? To say, shall I actually bother? You know, the other thing that they do is the ones who've actually they may be retired now. This is the older ones, these people in their 60s, that kind of thing, who've been political campaigners before. They keep you talking deliberately on the doorstep for ages.
Oh yes,
yeah, because then that's the fewer houses you'll be able to, other houses you'll be able to leaflet. Oh, that one, that old trick, and it is an old trick.
Very much led me into my second to last anecdote. The candidate that I was out campaigning for said to me, never to step into someone's house. And his example of that was that one time he spent half an hour in, I think, 2014, 2015, with some old lady in her house. And then he kind of had a very close look around there while she was preparing the second cup of tea, and found an enormous photo hidden behind the wardrobe of her with Nigel. And he was still a candidate. So, and that's the point at which he realised, I think I need to leave. Sort of like a very middle class version of Get Out.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll give you. And the last thing that I'll give is that in that same election campaign, we found the house of the Lib Dem candidate and proceeded to dump 5 boxes of leaflets outside of our house. I'm going to say dump, actually. We left the boxes very neatly outside of our house.
Well, I mean that is
very well.
Sometimes people sort of how shall I word this? Extract the urine by, you know, there have been times when I've been campaigning for one party or another, and we know, in fact, that this is the house of a councillor for the other one, and so you deliberately leaflet them, basically just to extract the urine, because you already know what the outcome is going to be, but it's just going to work.
7 missed calls on WhatsApp. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, go canvassing. It's good fun. That's what I tell the audience.
Get involved in politics.
It's fun. It's in the sun, and the candidate is socially expected to get your advice.
Hang on, I leaflet around North Wales. It is not in the sun on any day of the week. I've just been out for 2 hours with my horses, and it was storming. No.
Maybe you should do the campaign on horseback, Peter. That'll be interesting.
I've got off.
Stick on the suit of armour.
My foal is not desensitized enough for that. I will go flying. Anyway.
Our foal. I'm so sorry.
I will say though, I do want to get on to the Labour have been banned from a lot of pubs. I think last number I heard, though it was yesterday, was I say yesterday. This is going out Friday. On Tuesday, was 250 pubs have banned Labour MPs. Like 10 hotels have something like that. Specifically, what they're irritated at is that they have to pay higher business rates, and from what I've heard, most of them are paying over double what they used to. And apparently now your average £5 pint is getting about 10p profit when it used to be closer to £1. It's knackered them, for lack of a better term. And I mean, even in Wales, I've noticed £6 pints, which I remember paying in London in 2017 or something like that. And I thought, I'm never paying that much again for a pint. and now it's probably about £20 in London. I don't know.
I was going to say, if you're getting a pint for £6, will you tell me which pub it was in, please?
Literally any pub in Wales. I remember when I first moved here 4 years ago now, and me and my girlfriend went to the local, well, it was a Wetherspoons, it's not anymore, but went to the local Wetherspoons, and it was £2, something like £2.50 for a pint of Brewdog, and I nearly fell out of my chair because in Manchester that's
my God.
£4 something. Yeah, so
I mean, you shouldn't be drinking Brewdog at all in general, but I think the sign of the times here is that I used to be able to. So I started uni in 2022. I'm a child. I'm a baby. I used to be able to. I did go out with my friend Michael, who Patrick you've met. I'm sure we'll get Michael on the show at some point. He's a very interesting guy. Also does a podcast. And I used to be able to go out with Michael before uni with £25 in my pocket. Insert things that happen that I probably can't say like company. I would go out and I'd wake up with 5, maybe 10 left. No problem at all.
And that was 2022.
That was
It's
2022. That
it's
was
just-
that. Unheard of that, and that would include food. For goodness sake.
I mean, I've when I was living with my parents, me and my dad watched Early Doors. It's a pub-based sitcom based in Manchester. I think it was written in about 2002, something like that. And you know, they'd give £1 for 2 pints of Guinness and get change. Like this is, I mean, obviously that's all gone wrong. But now, you know, since then, something like a third of the pubs have closed in the country. It's only got worse since Labour's budget. Ultimately, this, I mean, he was on Times Radio, the guy who started all this. I can't remember his name, but he effectively said, "I don't want to get political, but this is a Labour government, and they are killing our industry. What else are we supposed to do? Because you can't strike." Need to make money. So I'm largely in support of it. Obviously, Clarkson has banned everyone as well.
Oh, he very famously did it on Times Radio as well, actually, didn't he? That's where he made the comments. But for me, I don't really like how people are saying this is a cancel culture thing, or they're cancelling because of opinions. No, they're cancelling because of what they've done. This is the thing. It's like you said, it's a reaction to the policy.
It's a strike,
It's not. Yeah, it is their version of a strike. I was listening to somebody on Jeremy Vine, actually. I can't remember what her name is. And she was like, "Oh, it's just attention seeking." I was like, that's the point.
Yeah.
It's to draw attention to the issue. Like, you know, I was like, what a stupid point to make. But I do think it's a really good way of comparing it to the strikes. As in, like you said, they can't just stop working because they need to keep working because they're not making any money. I think at one point it was 3 pubs a day. At one point we're closing 3 pubs a day, but it's crazy.
Yeah.
But you know,
we now aren't really making money.
No.
Well,
I have nothing open on a Monday.
Well, see, this is the point, though, isn't it? Is that, you know, drawing attention to an issue is what a strike is supposed to be about. But as you say very correctly, Peter B, it's because of what you've done rather than what you've said. It's not an offensive social media post. It's your actual policies that you are actually having implemented via the civil service and the machinery of government. This is because of what you've done. So therefore, when you look at that kind of thing, you're thinking, okay, is this, well, shall we say that protests are graded? You know, but by means of, you know, are they actually a response to something that derives directly from actual government policy, or are they derived from a matter of well, I suppose a matter of principle you can perhaps suggest applies to social media posts. But really, it's far more potent when what you're saying is, you've done this. You quite possibly done this without putting it in your manifesto, hint, hint. And now here we are with a situation in which the livelihood that I was practicing and have perhaps been practicing for decades is gone. And when you find yourself in a position when you know, as people may or may not be aware, I've been between jobs for a while now, trying to reestablish after 22 years of experience across business, law, education, defense, politics, journalism, and now I find myself saying, why does nobody want this experience? So, in fact, it's one of those where I can understand the frustration of people, because this affects everyone. Now, what I can see happening, though, is a lot of businesses may well end up moving towards more of a sessional model. As I think I was referring to earlier, day rate, hourly rate, monthly invoice, whatever it is, because then you're not paying this additional NI rate, this additional superannuation rate, because you don't need to. So I can see a lot of employers moving towards that model. If they do that, though, as a contractor, you have far fewer rights. So with that said, the overall assessment of that is, in fact, if that is what ends up happening, you've deprived what you'd like to call working people, labour, of benefits they would otherwise have had. Now, it's not the first time that policy has been ill thought through. And as I've said earlier, we have also called out reform for policy that has been ill thought through. We have not had the opportunity to call out the Conservatives for policy that has been ill thought through, because there's barely been any. Although one should think back to their conference from earlier this year, oh, hey, we'll abolish stamp duty. Okay, fine. You've announced something. Now I am hearing positive vibes from within the artist formerly known as CCHQ, of course it is still CCHQ, but we appear to be moving beyond the era of formatty Parker Street, which for those of us have been
the basement,
yeah, well, for those of us who've been in political circles for some time, that very much marks the end of an era. It is also true that political parties, when they anticipate getting into power, tend to move physically closer to the Houses of Parliament. Reform's done it, Labour did it. You see, so there is that. But what was I on about? Oh yeah, policy. It's one of those where you kind of, with that said, and we have said this on this podcast before, so apologies for repeating myself, but it's a case of minimizing your attack surface when it comes to that kind of thing. But it's a much easier thing to do. Will certainly get media headlines if you make a move such as, well, literally moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, actually, about moving closer, being more involved in the kind of the center of it all. And reform have to be careful on that line, though, because they're seen as the outsiders. If they suddenly start behaving like the uni party, which I think they are wandering down that path very easily, the base again will then start to say, well, wait a minute, you've let in all the Tories that you said were terrible. You've then started to behave like the uni party, and now you're playing Westminster politics games. What part of you is not establishment? And I think they've got a real messaging problem in their future.
Understand if that happens. If that happens, they've got the wonderful alternative that is Advance UK. Imagine that.
Well, Haryan Hersiali did just join as a member, so they're actually attracting some big talent.
Hold on, no, I actually watched the clip. She's not a member. She's not allowed to be a member because she's not a British citizen. She has, however, been taken on as a policy advisor. I couldn't see any specifics on that, but it seemed a lot to me like Ben Habib was looking for a big name to announce. Oh, they've joined. Now you should join too, because I'm still not convinced he actually reached that 30,000. Start the party, but well,
we can talk numbers here. So Reform, of course, have their little ticker that they have on their website, the membership counter.
270,000 now, yeah.
I was surprised. I was surprised at the time that it apparently took. Perhaps different teams are not talking to each other, for them to update the sort of the main message thing because they put out the press release, and this was an immediate release one. It was not, embargoed. That we have now, because Labour have lost. Actually, they gave several different figures. One of them was 60,000, another one 100,000 members. Therefore, we've overtaken them. But that's not because we've got more members, it's because they've lost them now. Okay, well, that's fair enough. But for about 8 hours on that website, they did not update the when we get through 309,000 members, we will have overtaken Labour. They have done it now. But with any degree of sensibility, one might have said, well, perhaps you should have done that first or in tandem. But they didn't.
Yeah, I agree. But I often make it a rule not to get into member measuring contests with Nigel Farage. It's a solid rule of life. I think that's a one to follow. But it is the interesting one when it comes to membership numbers is people leaving the party. So they're getting lots of new members, but it's about retention rate. And Reform at one point lost 10,000 in a month, which is very careless of them. But, there's a way to always look at the numbers in whatever particular political perspective you want to. But I don't really think that realistically that membership numbers correlates to chances of a general election victory, because Corbyn at one point had the largest political party in Europe. So it's one of those things where it looks great on a headline and you get to bash some Westminster SW1ers around, but realistically I don't think the public really cares. And you could even argue that it makes you a bit childish at times, really. I thought that whole thing with Kemi last year was ridiculous.
Well, to be fair, oh god, I can talk about that, but just briefly before that, the thing I found funny was that if you go on Reform's membership sign-up thing, you've got standard membership. You've also got young person's membership. For people like Simon. Welcome back, Simon.
Hello.
Sorry, connection dropped out a bit. That's all right.
Yes, the 5G gods have decided that they are woke and they're not going to let me participate in open Discord.
No, very well. But if you go on their membership sign up, you can sign up as a regular member for £25 per year, or you can sign up as a young member, for which I think their definition is about the same as the Tories.
It's just about to ask that question, actually.
Under 55.
So for £10, but it doesn't ask you anything. It doesn't even ask you.
Big scandal about Raoul Braverman allegedly buying like 5 memberships.
So this is my point: is that it doesn't even check whether or not you are in fact a young member. I am 39. I could go on there now and sign up as a Reform member for £10 of the bank's money, owing to my current state of financial distress. And it wouldn't matter. So one has to take, this party wants to run the country. Okay? One has to take some stock. This will probably, brass you off, Peter S., but
fine.
One has to take some stock of what is going on here when you have that kind of thing going on. And it's like I was saying earlier off air, that one has to. I've been a manager for many years, and when I look at a situation like that, I'm going to have to start asking questions about who is talking to whom. Just as I was saying, I got paid by Talk for an appearance a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm grateful to get paid, but if I am in charge of that department, I'm going to be saying what the sodding hell is going on here. Who is not talking to whom? You see?
Yeah.
And there are plenty of other situations. I'm going to shut up in a second, but there are plenty of other situations I could mention where what I've found is that the primary problem here is that people aren't talking to each other, or they aren't articulating strategies coherently. And when we find that, what we need to do is to work out who is not talking to whom, and then work out why they're not doing it. And
Yeah,
I think
you'd
I
hope
think
to
these
see
are-
improvements. Yeah.
So these are sort of organizational management issues that need to be addressed, and that's perfectly
This is why
fine.
There's somebody I know who was interviewed for a job at Reform almost exactly a year ago, and he apparently still has access to a party email account. He never even got the job.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Yeah.
I thought you were just going to say never heard back, and I thought that's usual, but no, that's not.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They
But
pulled out the job, and then he just sort of was like, "Yeah, I've still got the email account. I don't do anything with it." It's like, you are a better man than me.
Well, it's one of those where 2 years ago, this would have meant nothing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
When the poll of an 8%, whatever it was, but now we're looking at a situation like, okay, you actually want to run the country. I mean, I'm sorry, the standards have to rise. With that said, I've been a Tory member for some time. You kind of look at that and you think, yeah, I mean, I've seen CCHQ. Oh dear, well, not me, but
yeah, I left the Tory party 2 years ago. I'm still on half their mailing list.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, did I tell you about the time I left Labour?
Yeah. I think you did.
Oh yeah, this is amazing.
But go on.
I'll do it again.
Yes, it is a good one.
The scales fell from my eyes at the 2018 conference when, in fact, my own MP stated, with her majority of 48 votes, stated that there should be a general strike. And if conference had basically said, yeah, all right, a few people clapped, and simmer down, But that is not what happened. Conference erupted. They all were for this, and then the scales fell from my eyes. I saw who these people really were. And it took me a month. I was a Labour man, Okay. And this is what I like to, sort of put forward on this channel, is that people go on journeys. And I decided in the end, no, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot be shoulder to shoulder with these people anymore. And so I emailed the branch chairman and I said, I am leaving. Because there is no particularly prescribed way to actually leave a political party in this country. Certainly isn't with Reform unless you just cancel the direct debit. So, but it's exactly what I did. I cancelled my sub. And then I got a letter saying, you cancelled your subs. And I was like, yes, that's because I've left, you prize bunch of
people.
So-and-sos. Well, there we are. And then I got another one saying, oh, perhaps you're just a bit hard up. Well, you could pay less. I'm like, no, I'm on 40 grand a year. I'm just not giving any of it to you, that's all. You see? And this went on for months. Until I eventually stood as a Tory councillor, and then they noticed. And so I have a letter now telling me the likes of me are not welcome in what at the time was Corbyn's Labour, which I intend to get framed at some point.
That's crazy.
Prize treasure.
Well, there we are. But the point simply being, that actually people do not pay attention. Organisation is typically terrible. And this is one of the major parties in this country. They can't even get it right.
Yeah.
That was the point of telling that story. Is that we can all poke fun at Reform for the various things that they are cocking up, which arguably, as we've just been saying, they are. Mm-hmm. But if the major parties can't even get it right either, then perhaps a bit of fairness there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. But what I will say just to counter that is there's a big difference between saying you're going to do politics differently, doing the exact same thing, and then pretending to be morally superior about it, which is half of the reform base, in my experience. Sorry, Peter S. But I think that's the big point. Yeah, I think this is the point, is that when they promised to do things differently, they've acted more like the Uni Party in 2004 than I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, it's a bit crazy, actually. And I think it's the reason why the Nathan Gill thing sticks around is because of the reaction to it, to run to a lawyer, not open a public investigation into reform links to Russia and clearing it up, which is what they should have done. They ran to a lawyer, which is what every political party would have done. The reason that the public get really sick and tired of these kind of things, and why the management of a party is so important, because it tells you how they're going to be in government. And so when you're actually dealing with other people's money who have been forced to give it out of taxation and not because they're a member, they start to be a little bit more, well, wait a minute, who's running the show here? Hence why you end up with the likes of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, because nobody bothered to look about. Well, how was Keir Starmer running the Labour Party at the time when everybody was interested in the dumpster fire that was the Conservatives? It is one of those things. Why these stories? They might seem really Westminster bubble, but they're a bigger part of the small part of a much bigger story that definitely needs telling. And unfortunately, it doesn't sell as many headlines, so it doesn't get told.
Well, would you agree with me, Peter B, that the reality is that it's a bit like a black hole? You know how it is once somebody passes the event horizon. And as they pass the event horizon, you see their image distorted. They have passed the event horizon, but you as an external observer can't see it. So the trouble is, though, the closer and closer you get to the center of, in this case, the centers of power, to an external observer, the less and less they look like the person you knew.
But then it's a conviction of character and will to be able not to become the thing that you said you were, that you didn't like. And I wrote a very good article. I wrote an article for I think it was The Critic, actually, saying you can't reform what you've become. And this was just after the Rupert Lowe debacle, which was catastrophically handled. And I think that set the tone in my eyes of where who Reform actually are, and the fact that they haven't moved on from UKIP despite being 4 different parties since then.
Well,
let's keep the rest of the reaction to that.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was a very good article.
My Twitter feed is anything to go by. It's not well.
Well, I have my own criticisms of Rupert Lowe that my entire channel is pretty much dedicated to. I keep a close eye on him, Reform, and Ben Habib, and most of the time I end up finding it quite funny. I don't know if we did talk about him making the Great Yarmouth Party last week, but it was only me and Patrick.
Oh goodness me!
Yeah, I can't see what I can see what the play is. Rupert Lowe likes being a local MP, but obviously he's got this team around that wants to do national stuff. That seems to be the whole story, which is all very funny because obviously
there is a point to be made that I think he's not being treated very fairly by people that have adverse agendas, shall we say?
No, definitely. I mean, I keep a close eye on him, and as I say, it just seems to come down to his team in his office want to run Restore, want to run the rape gang inquiry, which last I heard on that is, we've got bigger plans for next year, but nothing's really happened. And then there's stories of
big plans coming soon, yeah.
And then there's stories of Sammy Woodhouse, who's supposed to be running it, blocking survivors, which they've publicly said on Twitter. It's all a bit strange, to say the least. It's like they're kind of throwing things out there and seeing what sticks, but some of these things are very important and can cause trauma. So I'd be careful with that, which is probably why Reform themselves stepped away from doing their own inquiry, because to do it properly costs hundreds of millions. Well, they do when they're run by the government anyway. So, But I think with that we will leave it there. So I'd like to thank very much to the panel for coming on. So thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter B.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Patrick.
Good evening, sir.
Right. With that, thank you all very much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.